In 2013, the United States reached an educational milestone. For the first time, a majority of the country's public school students, 51% of them to be precise, fell below the federal government's threshold for being low income, meaning they were eligible for a free or subsidized school lunch. This wasn't an overnight development. According to data compiled by the Southern Education Foundation, the percentage of American public school students who are low income has been rising steadily since the foundation started tracking the number in 1989. Back then, fewer than a third of students met the definition. Passing the 50% mark may be a symbolic distinction, but as symbols go, it is an important one. It means that the challenge of teaching low-income children can no longer be considered a side issue in American education. Helping poor kids succeed is now, by definition, the central mission of American public schools, and by extension, a central responsibility of the American public. It is a responsibility we are failing to meet. According to statistics from the U.S. Department of Education, the gap in 8th grade reading and math test scores between low-income students and their wealthier peers hasn't shrunk at all over the past 20 years. The gap between poor and wealthier 4th grade students narrowed during those 2 decades, but only by a tiny amount. Meanwhile, the difference between the SAT scores of wealthy and poor high school seniors has actually increased over the past 30 years, from a 90-point gap on an 800-point scale in the 1980s to a 125-point gap today. The disparity in college attainment rates between affluent and low-income students has also risen sharply, and these days, unless children from poor families get a college degree, their economic mobility is severely restricted. Young people who grow up in families in the lowest income quintile, with household income below about $21,500, and don't obtain a BA, now have just a 1 in 2 chance of escaping that bottom economic bracket as adults. These disparities are growing despite the fact that over the past 2 decades, closing the test score gaps between affluent and poor children has been a central aim of national education policy, as embodied in President George W. Bush's No Child Left Behind law and President Barack Obama's Race to the Top program. These government efforts have been supported and supplemented by a constellation of nonprofit groups, often backed by philanthropists with deep pockets and an abiding commitment to addressing educational inequality. Along the way, certainly, those efforts have produced individual successes, schools and programs that make a genuine difference for some low-income students, but they have led to little or no improvement in the performance of low-income children as a whole. The ongoing national discussion over how to close those gaps, and whether they even can be closed at all, has not been confined to policymakers and philanthropists. Educators across the country are intimately familiar with the struggles of children experiencing adversity, as are social workers, mentors, pediatricians, and parents. If you work with kids who are growing up in poverty or other adverse circumstances, you know that they can be difficult for teachers and other professionals to reach, hard to motivate, hard to calm down, hard to connect with. Many educators have been able to overcome these barriers, with some of their students at least, but I've spoken with hundreds more in recent years who feel burned out by, even desperate over, the frustrations of their work. Those of us who seek to overcome these educational disparities face many obstacles, some financial, some political, and some bureaucratic. But the first obstacle, I would argue, is conceptual. We don't yet entirely understand the mechanisms behind childhood adversity. What is it about growing up in poverty that leads to so many troubling outcomes? Or, to put the question another way, what is it that growing up in affluence provides to children that growing up in poverty does not? These are the questions that I've been trying to answer in my reporting for more than a decade. My first book, Whatever It Takes, took as its subject the work of Geoffrey Canada, the founder of the Harlem Children's Zone, and examined, among other topics, how neighborhoods affect children's outcomes, and particularly how the experience of living in a neighborhood of concentrated poverty constrains children's opportunities. My second book, How Children Succeed, considered the challenges of disadvantaged children through a different lens, the skills and capacities they develop, or don't develop, as they make their way through childhood.